All right. Thank you all for coming to the Brown University School of Public Health this afternoon for our program entitled Building Bridges, 21st Century Healthcare and the Future of Public Health and Entrepreneurship. My name is Dono Barrario. I'm the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs here in the School of Public Health and a Professor of Behavioral and Social Sciences. This is the second part of a long-standing relationship, and hopefully even longer subsequent to this, relationship between public health and entrepreneurship. And for me, it's important for two key reasons. First, it represents a dialogue and a partnership between the Jonathan Nelson Center and the School of Public Health. And it's a partnership I hope to see continue to flourish through more programs such as this, more student initiatives, and research scholarship that hopefully will bridge our fields together. In fact, this program today was catalyzed by a meeting we had with Elizabeth Carlson and Emily Yamron, who organized Brown's Health Hack, which will be coming again this coming fall. So let's give it up for Emily and Elizabeth. Stay tuned for the Brown Health Hack, September 2018, right? September 2018? A second reason why I think this program is important is because public health really needs entrepreneurship. There's an often quoted statistic that it takes on average 15 years for a biomedical or public health discovery to become implemented into practice, if it's implemented at all. So that's, for me, an unacceptably long time between a discovery being published in the scientific literature to being scaled up in a practice setting in a way that could save and improve people's lives. So we need the perspective of entrepreneurialism to help accelerate the translation from discovery into practice and into utility so that people's lives can be improved, diseases can be averted. This approach of entrepreneurialism in public health doesn't necessarily invoke a capitalistic or profit-centered mindset. Not that there's anything wrong with that. What it does mean is anticipating the needs of the market, aligning the needs of the market with the utility of the product that public health or biomedicine can provide, and developing specific strategies for bringing innovations to scale. Today we hear from 4 entrepreneurs who will share their experiences about growing a public health idea into a product and then bringing that product to market. This panel will be moderated by Robby Greenglass, class of 2007, who's managing director at Waterline Ventures and who is advisor to Shields Health Solutions. Robbie will introduce each speaker. Before I hand the floor over to Robbie, I'd like to acknowledge Dean Bess Marcus, the Dean of Public Health, who's been a champion of creating innovative partnerships across campus and seeing how public health is relevant at all levels of the university. And I'd also like to acknowledge Danny Warshay, who's the Executive Director of the Nelson Center for Entrepreneurship. Now let me cede the microphone over to Robbie, and I hope you enjoy this panel.
Well, good evening, everybody. My name's Robby Greenglass. I am very excited to be here. We have a fantastic panel, and I think just the fact that the School of Public Health and the university and the Nelson Center for Entrepreneurship are all coming together to put this on just shows how important all these different aspects are and how they all relate with each other. So I'll give just a very quick background on myself and want to turn it over to our panelists. They're much more exciting than me. But after Brown, I've spent my whole career in healthcare and all on the finance side. So started off in healthcare investment banking, moved up to Boston to join a venture firm called Highland Capital Partners, where we were investing in early and late stage companies in healthcare tech and digital media. My focus there was on healthcare IT and services. And then launched Waterline Ventures after getting an MBA at Harvard Business School to focus on early stage healthcare technology innovation. So companies that are working with payers, providers, pharma across the healthcare spectrum, and building technology solutions for those different players. So I'm going to actually let everybody introduce themselves. And so I think a quick background on yourself and what you've been doing, but I think most importantly, wanted to kick it off with, what was most exciting being back at Brown? And I know for me that's food. So I started off today with breakfast at Eastside Pockets. I had lunch at Paragon, and then I got a Meeting Street cookie before coming here. And then, dinner, we haven't even gotten there yet. So that was how I kicked off my day. But Johnny, why don't you kick it off?
Thanks, Robbie. Well, what's for dinner?
Mill's Tavern.
Mill's Tavern?
Yeah, so.
Let's do it. I'm Johnny Liu. That's right. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I went to Brown undergrad and also medical school. I was a Mymee. And after graduating medical school, I started a company called Doctor's Choice. We help retirees navigate Medicare by offering them expert guidance on the entire process. So it's been about 5 years since I started the company. And the company is actually located here in Rhode Island. So it's been a fun adventure.
Thank you. So the first thing you should probably know about me is I'm actually not a Brown grad, so I feel like I shouldn't be up here, but thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this discussion. I'm very excited to be here. I took a very non-traditional route to get into healthcare. I actually started my career working in insurance. And for the last 10 years, I was an executive in the insurance and the health industries. After insurance, I was hired away by a wellness company to lead their client management division, and that was my first foray into the world of health data. My business right now is a health analytics company. We are rethinking the way that analytics are being done and trying to solve some problems that are out there in healthcare by using not out-of-the-box solutions. So, an example of that would be for employers. Your average employer is spending millions of dollars on healthcare, but they really don't have that much information to guide some of their decisions. So there are lots of products out there that will put numbers in front of people, but it's not really meaningful for the people who are looking at it. So we're taking problems like that and thinking about them differently and trying to make health data more actionable for the people who need to use it. So that's probably enough about me. Shannon Shallcross.
Hi, I'm Sophia Keisha, class of '96, and I didn't have a lot of time to roam around, but I was trying to find Cafe Paragon because I was a waitress there when I was a student, and I got lost. I didn't recognize the campus, and I met a friend instead for coffee. So, just briefly about myself, I never would have guessed I would end up in healthcare or in the realm of public health. I'm so pleased to be here. My brother graduated Brown's Mymee program as well. My father's a doctor, and I started out in real estate, private equity, distressed investments. And through a very circuitous, roundabout way, through my personal passion about learning about the toxic exposures from what I buy and do, I now devote all of my resources towards raising public awareness and empowering people on the little tweaks they can make in their daily lives to reduce their toxic exposures. I released a book in 2015. A couple months later, I ended up on the Dr. Oz show. They wanted to learn what a toxic exposures expert would buy at the dollar store. And since then, I speak often in public. I write a lot. I work with a very large developer in the city to help them create not just buildings and neighborhoods that are conscious of the planet, but also conscious of human health. And I'm building an online detox academy that communicates empowering information in a way I would have enjoyed. Short, sweet, to the point, and really practical.
I'm Daniel Rothman. I was 04 grad in cognitive neuroscience, and my start of entrepreneurship actually started here at Brown. I did a 197 with Hazeltine, ended up launching that as my first job out of school. It was a sleep technology company called Zeo. We ended up building it for a while and got some scale, and then it folded. But I've gone on to do other startups. The one that I'm doing now is sort of a quick and dirty version of what Sophia is doing in a way. For people who have chronic autoimmune disease, our theory is that it's not natural for your immune system to come out and attack you. So we look at the diet, lifestyle, and environment for each person uniquely and identify what is triggering their immune system to do that wrong thing. By identifying the triggers that are sort of person specific, not everything that is potentially a trigger, but the 2 or 3 worst ones for you, we can take those triggers out and make people better. And because the people who need what we do most are disproportionately women, especially minorities, especially who are poor, our goal is to triangulate and get paid by the people who are paying for the expensive biological drugs. So payers and self-insured employers, we do what we do for patients for free and get paid by reducing the demand for Humira, Benlysta, Stelara, Enbrel, Remicade, and also surgeries that people get that are presumably overused. So this is my current crusade, and yeah, I guess we'll turn it back.
Awesome. Well, we spent a little time preparing for this and put together a little agenda, and I'm going to flip it around right off the bat with the first question. So, we are sitting here in the School of Public Health. We have 4 different examples of for-profit companies. You're for-profit, right? And I think people might initially say, how do you have a for-profit company in a public health setting? How are you I think the healthcare industry in general is both complex and interesting and fun, I guess, to work in, because we have for-profit, we have non-for-profit, we have government entities, and each one of those has to work with the other 2 in order to be successful. And so, wanted to kind of kick things off on, why did you start a for-profit company? And how do you and your businesses interact with other nonprofits, government entities, and how does that whole complexity make things work in the end? So I don't know who wants to. Anyone want to kick that off, or Johnny, you're closest, so you can.
I have the mic. I have a short response to it. Being in private equity, which is I worked in high risk, high return investments. I know through all my experiences how much more value employees can contribute when their incentives are aligned with those of the employer, with the investors. And so on every level, everyone who has profit participation in some way, they're always looking to maximize efficiency, they're more of a creative thinker, and it's more fun. And so I think that there's so much opportunity for for-profits to transform healthcare.
I'll just say a word on this. So, I don't really know, in my mind, I don't really think about it as for-profit versus nonprofit versus government. I think that, I have been exposed to entities in all of those buckets that have enormous merit for public health. And I don't really know that it's about, well, how do you make your money? There are so many other things that go into it, but actually, to your point, I agree that when there is financial incentive at stake, that it really incentivizes people to work even harder and to solve very difficult problems, and there is a great amount of pressure to succeed. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. I don't think that for-profit is the only way that we can solve healthcare problems, but it is a way. And for us personally, we simply became a for-profit company just because of the type of work that we were doing and the type of customer that we wanted to go after. It's simply the model that made sense for us.
Change how you guys recruited talent, or we'll get there. Change how you recruited talent, or finance the company. What did it enable different ways to do it?
It does open up some more options, but it also closes some doors too. So for us, we're self-funded. So when we happen upon a great technology that we know has huge potential, we always know that we could go out and get funding if we want to. There have been other times where we want to be part of a research study, but we can't, just because we're a for-profit company. So, there are different sides to the coin, and, I just was at an awesome clinic last week, Clinica Esperanza, which is based here in Providence. They are amazing. They provide healthcare to the uninsured Spanish-speaking population in Rhode Island. And they do an amazing job, and it's in part made possible by the fact that the medical director there does a ton of fundraising. So not only does she get funding, but she also gets donations of prescription drugs and vaccines and things that people need. And because of that, she had cited something amazing, like the cost to treat one person there for a year was something crazy like $170. And because they don't deal with medical billing. And there are all sorts of other things that are cut out of the equation. But anyway, all of this to say, I've seen it work, be it nonprofit or for-profit, and there are pluses and minuses to both in my mind.
Didn't want to jump the gun on that one again. So Doctor's Choice, I wanted to elaborate a little bit about what we do. Just realize that since I'm in it all the time, I assume that everybody knows what I'm doing. So we help retirees when somebody retires from work. We help them provide the education, the navigation, and the handholding that somebody needs to navigate through the healthcare system, choosing their insurance options, and also helping them afterwards if they have a bill that they don't understand, if something happens to them and they need somebody to really hold their hand through the process. That's where we come in. And when we first started, I wanted to be a nonprofit, and because I thought that it fit the profile of a nonprofit. So I have the worst luck of starting things. So it was around sequestration, so there was no grants being given out, and also it was that, hey, got no experience.
Johnny, I may be naive here. What's sequestration?
Oh, it's when the government doesn't give out any money. Or in a lot of other funding agencies just stop funding, and there's sort of a shortage of funds for a lot of nonprofits. And I'm a true believer where there's a will, there's a way. And also now looking back on things, that really a lot of times the quote that the milkmaid of philanthropy is margin comes to mind a lot from a lot of my mentors. And so because this was such a strong idea for me, and I was really passionate about going after how do we create the best educational system for people that are navigating the healthcare field. So basically started out as a for-profit because we ran into a lot of hurdles starting it as a nonprofit, and then ran it as a for-profit ever since.
You want it?
I think they covered it.
Okay. All right. So now we can go back to how I kind of want to start this. I'm, really curious about kind of day zero for all of you guys. It's how did the idea come about? How did you say, either I'm leaving my job and gonna go start this company? Was this had this been kind of, you've been dreaming about this for a while and finally said, all right, today I'm gonna do it? But would love to hear about kind of the genesis of these ideas, how you got started, and tell some of the war stories about about starting a new venture.
Sure.
You can also talk about the successes too, but the war stories are fun.
From my previous experience, getting something that is totally sort of breaking the mold into adoption is very hard. So for this current venture, it's called Mymee. I met the lady who started the research at least 5 years ago, and I sort of watched her do the research and waited until she could get to a point where I thought it could be commercialized. I sort of waited out the ugly 5 years where things go nowhere and joined right at the moment where I thought it could be accelerated. This is based on the third startup I did is a tool which sits on top of the EMR, it graphs health over time. You can see if somebody's getting better or worse. It turns out that when you put this into a hospital, it reduces mortality in the hospital by about 30%. But because people didn't believe that it was possible to do this with medical data that was in the EMR, nobody would want to try it because it was not published, and nobody would publish because they wouldn't try it. It took 5 years to get the first paper published. In the next 5 years, they published another 36 papers on the topic. So I sort of skipped that 5 years in this startup, and I hopefully have just joined for the good part about a year ago.
But so I think we have four different companies here. So tell it, how you started the first while you were Brown,
Yes.
right? And Just give us a little bit of the
Sure.
sequence going through here.
So the first one I started sort of by accident. I wanted to see if it was possible to do this thing, which is wake somebody in the right stage of sleep so that they wake up feeling better. And it was an interesting idea, sort of sat in the back of my brain. Somewhere between junior and senior year at Brown, I first volunteered as a subject in the sleep lab here, and then worked in the sleep lab to study how you study somebody who's sleeping. And gradually got some fluency in the space. I basically read all the work that was done on normal sleep science in the last 20 years, and said, it does look like you wake up sort of if you set your alarm, sometimes in light sleep, sometimes in deep sleep, and sometimes in REM sleep, and it would be better if you only woke up in light sleep. So it was sort of, the kernel of possibility was there, and then I pulled in some engineering students and sort of drew something on a whiteboard in Barris and Holly, and that became a thing. In terms of, I mean, the first summer out of school, we paid ourselves $600 a month. My rent was $550, and we put ramen in the office so you could afford to eat if you were working. It was 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and I ran a sleep lab at night. This is what it takes to be an entrepreneur. It's not that, the people who are successful entrepreneurs aren't smarter than anybody else. It's just they, for some reason, have this burning desire to prove something. And they're willing to work 2 or 3 times as many hours as a regular person who takes a regular job and gets paid generally much better.
You're really selling it.
Don't do startups. It's a terrible idea. And if I can dissuade you with that, you shouldn't be at the table doing a startup anyway. Only do it if you have to do it.
Or love doing it. I guess if you love doing it, you have to do it, right? Sophia, I mean, distressed debt real estate investing to a healthcare startup is probably the last thing on this list that I would have expected for you to be here. Yes.
I never would have. I loved my job. My dream. So I'll back up a bit. When I graduated from Brown, I felt really lost. I am someone who's been curious about so many things. The idea of having to focus was suffocating, and so it took me a while to pick what I wanted my first job to be. And I remember it was like 2 or 3 months I really struggled with, should I work for a nonprofit or for-profit, because I thought I was a really good person. So why wouldn't I help make the world a better place by joining a nonprofit? And I legitimately was really struggling with this question. And after about 2 or 3 months, I realized, given who I am and what excites me, which is learning a lot of things, solving problems, adding value, I decided, for the next few decades, I think over my lifespan, I will have more impact on the world if I start out in the for-profit world. There are so many things I can learn from that experience, and if I accumulate higher net worth and develop a network of influential, wealthy friends, then collectively we can give back later down the road. And so that's how I justified going in the for-profit world. And I ended up deciding to go into real estate for a number of reasons, but one is it allowed me to learn about lots of different industries because of the tenants. I had to assess the risk that they would not pay their rent. But I loved learning about all these businesses, and the more risky, the more exciting. And it meant chaotic, imperfect information that I had to dive into and master and come up with value creation strategies. And when I became a mother in 2007, I now have 3 amazing girls. Every night I approached motherhood in a similar way. It was a big unknown. I would study what I should know to take good care of my daughter the next day. And in this nightly ritual, I learned about toxic chemicals in baby bottles and the infant formula and the crib mattresses, and the list went on. For 8 years, I researched this. And I was just naturally applying the skill sets I used in my real estate career in this arena of toxic exposures. And I just want to know, as head of a household who wants to provide a healthy foundation for my family, what's a reasonable level of concern? What are the easy things I can do? And all along the way, it was heartbreaking to learn what I learned. And I thought, this must be happening to me for a reason. Like, why can't I be like all my other friends who aren't aware? They're blissfully aware. And my heart must be breaking day after day as I learn this, because I'm supposed to help spread the word and make the world a better place. And so I saw a gap in the market. I saw an opportunity to apply my background, my personality, and my passions towards an area that really needs more attention. So for me, I make choices that feel really authentic. I recognize market opportunities. I'm recognizing timing. I know that you can have a great startup idea, but if the market isn't ready for it, it's not going to work. So just also appreciating timing. And so I've been, I think that's good to be mindful of.
The timing piece is really important. So this is the first startup that I have started, and my business, BetaX Analytics, has been in business for 2 years. My partners, I have 2 partners, one's a technologist, one is a data scientist, and we actually had all worked together doing a similar type of work in a previous life. So the nice thing is we all knew each other, we knew our professional reputations, we knew, our strengths and our weaknesses. So we kind of went into the marriage, as I put in air quotes, it really is like a marriage. We went into it completely knowledgeable of these things. We were so gung-ho and excited 2 years ago, and we're still incredibly excited, but I think that's tinged with reality. And my partners actually approached me and they said, look, we have been wanting to start our own health analytics company for the last 2 years, but the problem is no one will listen to us. One's an IT guy, one's a data scientist. They really just needed someone who could help to tell their story. So that was my role in this trifecta, and we always joke that we have completely different strengths. I'm not a data scientist, and I never will be. And I need to know a certain amount, but we all rely very heavily on each other and the skills that the others bring to the table. Thinking about war stories, I don't really know if, thank God we don't really have any, cataclysmic story to tell, but one of the big themes that came up in the early days, and mind you, to kind of test our assumptions, I did go through a whole process of putting a business plan together. I don't necessarily believe that you have to, strictly follow a template and it needs to be 30 pages and it's got to have all these things, but I do think that you need to state some absolutes. What are your assumptions? Who are you going to be going after? What is the total addressable market? You have to kind of test to make sure, could this even financially work? If we get every potential customer out there, could we make the dollars and cents match? So we did go through that, but we had to test our assumptions, and we learned things along the way, and at certain points we had to kind of veer off and take a different direction. But one of the very valuable stories from those early days is I had a meeting with someone who is very prominent in the healthcare analytics space here locally, and I had a lot of professional respect for her, and I really just wanted to pick her brain and get to know a little bit more about what she did and what her challenges were. And I remember sitting down with her, and she just starts to tell me her story, and it was this incredibly personal story of, she had cancer, and her story tied in with exactly what she was doing for a living, and this is why she did what she did. And then she looked at me and she's like, so what do you do? And I'm thinking, health analytics? I really, I had a story, or so I thought, but this same theme kept coming around and recurring over and over again, the value of the story that you tell. And it's not only when you're getting clients, but it's also when you're getting investors. You need to have a compelling story, and not just for them, but for yourself and your team too, because just like we're talking about, it's not easy. And you do usually have to work much harder, for less of a financial return when you take a look at every single entrepreneur out there. They're not all, swimming in your Scrooge McDuck warehouse full of gold coins every single day. So anyway, all of that to say the value of the story that we tell as entrepreneurs is so important. And Johnny, we've talked about this before, how many times do we go back and kind of like refine our story and find out what's confusing, what works, what doesn't work. But
Well, I'm not gonna put you on the spot here, but what's the 30-second elevator pitch? What do you guys do? Tell us the story.
So I'll tell you the story that we tell to our employer clients. We usually explain that we have a background in wellness and in data science, and that we've seen that a lot of times data is intentionally kept from employers. So they can't really negotiate their contracts, and they're missing out on savings because they don't have actionable transparency to their data. So this is very specific. It's not a personal story on how my life was once saved, but at the end of the day, employers are really in the healthcare game, and they're looking to be conservative and responsible with the way that they use their money.
Daniel, I'm hold you to the 5-year rule because I'm in my 5 years of business now. So hopefully things are going to get better. Actually, things have been great. It's been a lot of fun. I'll be swimming in Bitcoins in no time. So the story of how I got started was it was about making healthcare. I know it sounds really cliche, but overall, it's how do we make healthcare better? But when I was going through medical school, I was going through last couple of years, and I spent a lot of time in clinical practice. And I was asking a lot of the preceptors I was working with, I said, well, are you happy doing what you're doing? And surprisingly, 9 out of 10 said no. And I was like, maybe I gotta rethink my career choices here. But then I quickly realized that the underlying trend was that everybody loved taking care of patients, everybody loved patient care. But the system has grown to a certain way where, it's kind of funny where the healthcare system, if you look at the Industrial Revolution where it was about middle management, middle management was a technology that consolidated human resources to create something bigger. And to today, that's technology. So technology does that. We have this decentralization, so everybody gets to do their own thing the way that they want it, but yet people are sort of held accountable by more technology. But healthcare tends to go the opposite way, which is you have all this consolidation, a lot more middle management, a lot of these new organizations which are very admin heavy, and it sometimes takes away from the patient-provider experience. So if you have healthcare as an exchange between a patient and a provider, and neither are happy, there's kind of a problem with this market. So that's what got me to thinking about, what am I doing here, and how can I help? And is the goal to be, I was going to primary care. Is the goal to be primary care physician, see 2,000 to 4,000 patients, 80 hours a week? Would I be happy doing that? And the answer was absolutely not, because I wanted to create a system where people are happy on both sides. So that got me to thinking about, well, who is really aligned with the patient aside from the provider and the caregivers? And surprisingly, I arrived at the answer of insurance companies. And it was because insurance companies, their financial incentive was to keep you healthy, because if you were healthy and you didn't put in claims, they would make more money. Right? It makes sense. And so here was my quest to really understand the insurance world, understand the insurance companies, how they work, because I had no idea. It felt like this big black box. And that got me on this journey. And because I think good and bad, being in Rhode Island, you're small enough where you get to have access to basically everybody that you have access to. But also there was, since the funding structure, if you were to start a company, if you were to do like a Series A or Series B, there's really not that much here. You have to move to Boston or New York, San Francisco, and whatnot. So it was really about, how do we bootstrap a company from the ground up, and what's the immediate impact that I can make right away? So that's when I was observing a lot of patients who were really confused about Obamacare coming to the office. I was spending a lot of time in this primary care office in North Smithfield, two providers, 2 urgent cares, about 4,000 patients, and about a quarter were on Medicare. So they were really confused, and they said, hey, it makes sense, right? Because you go to your doctor to ask what insurance you take and what insurance I should get in order to continue seeing you. That's why I named the company Doctor's Choice. consequently found out that was wrong. They don't teach you anything about health insurance in medical school, and they don't teach you how to talk to people about how to navigate through the system. And this initially came out to be, well, I didn't even think about it from a business perspective. It was an independent study project, and it was, what can we do? It was about 100 hours of research distilled down into a 40-minute presentation about Medicare. If you were getting mailings or advertisements about Obamacare, what do you need to do? What don't you need to do? And it was a 40-minute presentation, and that was it. No business model, nothing. I just kind of did it to do a proof of concept. And back then, I didn't know, what I was doing. Today, I still feel like that some days. But essentially, look back and looked like that was really the spark that got me on this journey. And the piece of advice I would get in terms of war stories, there's a lot of war stories I can't tell, but
You can tell that we're not live streaming.
Yeah,
no one's
not
watching.
at all. This is perfect. Well, in that case, so it's not to force things, because sometimes when you're really passionate about something, you can really you take as much action as you can and you go forward. But sometimes it's for me, I wish I waited a little bit more to have things congeal, because the biggest mantra that I live by is now is it takes 7 to 10 years to build anything substantial. If you look at anything at all, career, company, standing with the 5-year rule, I definitely believe that, because having seen every single company's success or failure that I've been introduced to, really you do need 7 to 10 years to make things happen. Even those people that, if you look at like the WhatsApp stories, so like the Uber stories where it's like, boom, you start a company and then 2 years later you're all billionaires. And people kind of chase after that dream, right? But they don't look at what it actually took for the founders to get to that stage. Maybe it's a prior failure, what lessons they learned. So it's sort of I say this jokingly, but not really, which is entrepreneurship is a lot like a spiritual journey, because there are certain lessons that every entrepreneur has to really learn in order to get to a certain stage, and your success is reflected, it's really a reflection of who you are as a person, versus a lot of people think that, hey, if I get there, then I will do this. So, so in terms of war stories, just in terms of just waiting for the right people, waiting for the right collaborators. I started the company with essentially the precursor to Doctor's Choice was just like a healthcare consulting company. It was 4 people, and 3 were physicians, 1 was not, 1 was from the insurance world, and then quickly basically decided that we were going to split it into 2 and 2, and I took the person from the insurance world and started another precursor to Doctor's Choice, and then figured out that my vision was bigger, and although we all are really good friends today, it's right now I'm the person that's leading the ship for Doctor's Choice and moving forward. So in terms of partnership, really making sure that everybody sees the vision, sees the big vision, or the little vision, which is totally okay. Make sure everybody's on the same page, and just know that it takes 7 to 10 years. So if you're not willing to commit 7 to 10 years to something, to see something through, then don't do it, because otherwise it's going to be a very slow ride.
So that's a perfect segue, because I wanted to talk a little bit about teams and building teams. And Shannon, you mentioned that your 2 co-founders were what kind of pushed you into this. Daniel, you've been part of several different teams. You guys started with a team and split, changes. How do you guys think about building your team from the start? How do you think about the different necessary components? How do you interact with your teams? Just tell us a little about. Anyone can start. Whoever.
So, one of my lessons learned from before I started a business, and this is just something about me, some people are cut out to be entrepreneurs and some people aren't. But one of the things that I learned from years and years working in corporate jobs was that for me personally, here's the metaphor, I couldn't be in the car if the person who was driving was a bad driver. So what that means is essentially it was very difficult for me to be in situations where I actually didn't have full control over what I was responsible for, but someone else did that actually wasn't really doing a great job. That was very difficult for me. And maybe it's a weakness on my own and I need to just accept that as part of life. But that was one of the things that really pushed me to start my own company, because I was like, all right, I need to either be in the driver's seat or pick my own team. So now that I have my own team, I am incredibly grateful for the talents and the skills that they have, and I think that they're amazing. But if I could just have my wish in this metaphorical car that we're in, that I happen to be driving, I wish that we'd all be amazing drivers and would all have like a broad range of skills. And I just say that because we're a self-funded startup, so we don't have this enormous budget for, okay, well now we're going to hire a head of sales, and now we're going to have a director of innovation. We're all wearing a lot of hats, and you can function very effectively when you can do more things. So that's kind of just a nice to have, but at the end of the day, I know it's much better to hire people who have all of those other skills as well. And as we scale up, I'm sure that we will. But anyone else
want to go about the team?
I'll quickly respond. I'm a big fan of very lean teams with a small handful of people who can wear many hats. That's a big part of my background, and I love operating that way to stay really nimble. I also love the idea that a former boss said to me. He said, we're always hiring. It's so rare we find a good fit that we're always looking, and whenever we find someone who's a great fit, we give them a job, we snatch them up, and I operate that way as well. And so I keep it really lean. I now am one person. I went through a stage where it made sense to have a full-time employee or two to wear many hats, and now I've gotten to a place where I need more specialization. And I'm not ready to hire, a headcount comes with so much administrative work. I try and minimize administrative work. And we live at a time where freelancers and amazing talents from all over the world are very accessible. So I have a team of freelancers they were born and raised in California, they work in Vietnam. And it's an exciting time for an entrepreneur to have affordable access to great talent.
There are a bunch of lessons that I learned with teams all along the way, mostly by making mistakes. To, I think, Johnny's point, putting the wrong team together because you're in a rush, terrible. I also learned the rule of never work with family by working with family. Never work with family. You're already basically married to the other people that you're in this startup with. Your fates are stuck in this tiny little ship that might capsize at any moment. And if you already have that existing dynamic on top of that, it's rough. I describe people sort of on a spectrum. You have people who are they know the job, they plug in, they do what they're supposed to do, and then you have people who are the flexible widgets. They can fake it pretty well. They're not great at any one thing, but most people who are in early stage startups, they sit here. And gradually, as the company grows, you need fewer of these people and more of these people. And there are different sort of cut points. At 50 employees, you tend to lose most of these, and most people coming in have real jobs. At the urgent care company I worked at, I was employee number 5. I did everything that had to do with math, which is a lot of different things. And then later we got a finance department and an accounting department and a business analytics department and all these other things, that my job became this very little sliver that wound through all the different aspects of the company. But getting back to putting together a team early stage startup, I think rather than going freelancer, I more lean towards getting somebody who can moonlight with you, so that as you grow, maybe you can pull them away more and hire them full time. But you need the professionals a little bit, and you need some flexible widgets who are willing to work like crazy and not sleep and try to change the world.
So I definitely agree with finding the right people is really, really important. And then also Daniel, I don't know, you might be proven right, but the whole working with family thing, I'll share a couple stories on that. So, one of the biggest things is just always be on the lookout for great people. Now, how many of you are actually thinking about starting a business down the road? A few, all right. The rest of you are here for entertainment. And ultimately you need a team, because if you want to build something substantial, and yes, you can be a solopreneur and make things work, but just understand that you're a solopreneur. You're making your own job. But if you want to scale up something, impact a substantial amount of people, then you will need a team eventually, because it's very hard to scale something on your own. Trust me, I tried it for 3 years. And so for me, I've always been on the lookout for great people, and a lot of times with the specialists that you'll need down the road. As a startup, especially if you're self-funded, you can't really afford a lot of these people, because when you first start, you can really only afford the generalists, and they're going to be, if you're lucky, they're generally going to be pretty good, but you're not going to be able to have a lot of the resources to afford the specialists right away. So for me, just an interesting story, I always thought that I was going to be entrepreneurial somehow, and I was always on the lookout for good people. And so our current CTO, who actually we had hired from Amazon, he and I met 12 years ago at a gas station. So, yeah. So and something just said, hey, seemed like a cool guy, I'll talk to him. I had my medical school books, and he was like, hey, what do you do? And I was like, hey, I'm going to medical school. Did you like it? And I was like, yeah, it's pretty good. And he was graduating school at the time. It was his family's gas station, and he just came from Lebanon. And we started talking. I said, well, you're a developer, and he goes, I am. And I said, great. So we just kept in touch, because I thought he was a really cool guy, and we hung out, and we worked on a lot of projects together, a lot of freelance projects for clients, and we were bootstrapping the company. And he had a full-time job, and because of that, we've worked together. We've known each other for 12 years, so he's like family, right? So now that we're able to afford somebody full-time, we hired him, and it's like he just started full-time in about 6 months ago and hit the ground running, because he understood my vision, understood what we were doing. And then also, I didn't have a ramp-up time in terms of trust versus, I guess if I had to do a search for somebody, which leads me to the second story of working with family. So I was looking for, when you find people that are high level in terms of management to work with you, really figure out who you complement well with, because that was one of the mistakes that I made in the beginning. Was if I really got along with somebody that was charismatic, I would love them. Be like, hey, do you want to join? Hey, I'll give you a cut or whatever. And instead of really assessing, okay, are we complementary or are we duplicative? Because if we're both trying to do the same, if we are both really good at sales and marketing, and we both try to do sales and marketing, who's going to do the operations? Who's going to do the finances? Who's going to do the product? And and so forth, and strategy. So really figuring out who you complement well with, and if you are an ops person, chances are you're not going to be very bubbly or sales oriented. So you got to find somebody who is. And if you're a salesperson, then you've got to do the opposite, because then you really make something that's cohesive. So at one point I realized that I really need to bring in an operations person. So I worked with a consultant, and it's not a story about consultants, but it was good. But just probably one of those war stories I can tell about later on. But we did a COO search and narrowed down the 3 candidates. And at the time, so my wife, we've been together a really long time, and she was working at a healthcare company in the compliance department, and she's also an attorney. So never thought of it, but one of my friends said, hey, look, John, your wife has really been your co-founder this whole time. And I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, well, she's been picking up your crap this entire, last 4 years. Whenever you drop the ball on something, she would do it, and you guys would be on track, and you guys would do it at midnight, and I know, because I hang out with you guys. And my friend was one that built a very, very successful company. And so I said, well, maybe there's some truth to that. So when I ended up researching, right, because learning from the venture capital space, you never bet on family run businesses. So I was like, I didn't want to go down that route. But I found out there were a lot of really great examples. It's all about focus, right? Where you focus, you're going to be able to find whatever you're looking to find. So I found all these multi-billion-dollar companies that was run by husband and wife teams, and they were successful. They were happy. They traveled together, and I was like, all right, this is pretty cool. And some of them were venture funded, and And one of the issues was, I was spending 80 hours, 90 hours, 100 hours sleeping at the office, and I was never home. And I said, this is great, because then you'll see me at the office, so I'll never have to come home. Then we had a kid, so that changed the whole conversation. So we actually hired my wife, and it's been 6 months, and actually it's been one of the greatest experiences so far in terms of growing companies, in terms of, we grew our staff, we doubled our staff, and without that complementary skill set and that trust, I don't know if I would have been able to build it even to the degree that I've built it to today.
Awesome.
We'll see. Don't record that. I guess
Yeah.
too late to live stream.
She's definitely watching right now. So
Yeah,
you
she's
said,
definitely-
yeah.
Definitely watching.
So first of all, in a couple minutes, we're going to come to you guys. So be thinking if you have any questions. But one last thing I wanted to ask the panel is, Johnny and I both had a professor here at Brown named Joseph Middleman, and he taught a course called Entrepreneurship and Good Work, EGW. And I think long before the Nelson Center for Entrepreneurship and that theme of entrepreneurship and good work and doing well while doing good has been an underlying foundation of Brown University. And I think that definitely comes up a lot in healthcare businesses as well. So just want to hear from you guys. How do you define success for your businesses? What is the end goal here? Is it a $20 billion Snapchat type of initial public offering? Is it having I won't give the examples. I want to hear from you guys. So Johnny, you ended, but you can start off.
I'll start. It was a very. How about now? All right, perfect. So Professor Middleman was he really shaped a lot of the mindsets of students going through his classes, and because of that class, they were able to shape their view of the world. So definitely, he was definitely top 3 professors at Brown, and another one's in the room. So so defining success, thought about this a lot, mainly because a lot of times it's easy to assign a number, right? Like, I get to $4 billion and I'll be all set. But then you really have to ask yourself, what does that mean to you? What's the feeling? Because ultimately we're all looking for a feeling, right? If you have success, if you have the money, you have the recognition, whether it's the 7 human needs, right? Which is whether it's security. If you can't eat, then you're not thinking about anything else. And then it's variety. You don't want to eat the same thing every single day once you get something to eat. And then there's the love and connection, which is, do we connect with each other? That if you had 3 weeks to live, chances are you're not going to go learn another language. Some people might, but it's about the relationships that you'll get because of the language you learn. Love and connection, and then growth, right? Are you growing? If you're doing the same thing every single day, are you growing? And then also there's contribution ultimately, which is if you got everything, what are you doing to contribute? How are you giving back? How are you making the world a better place? And also significance, which is something that a lot of people don't like to admit, but it's within all of us. We would like to be recognized. We want to do something because then we'll be significant, so that we can show this person that I'm worth it, so that we get the love and connection, and then or the security. So defining success, I think it's about what emotion are you going after, and at what point does whatever you're doing give you that emotion? Because ultimately, I see so many people where they reach, whatever financial goals they want to get to, they're still miserable. So if you're not happy today, then chances are you won't be happy to reach your goal. And defining success for you oftentimes is predicated on which emotion, because we all need security, we all end up wanting to give back, but in the middle, which emotion do you really connect with the most? There's always one for everybody that's greater than the others, and usually that's the framework that I use to define whatever success for me, because for me it's about love and connection. So it's about how can I connect with as many people as possible to bring as many people value, and what value can I bring them today. So that's the framework I use. As long as I'm true to that every single day, and there's no, I'm now a believer that there's no judgment day. That judgment day is every single moment. So am I living this moment to my highest light, and am I living this moment to the emotion that I really connect with? And that's for me how I have arrived at how I define success.
So right after my partners and I decided that we were going to start this business, we sat down and just had a very high-level conversation. So before we actually put pen to paper and put a business plan together, we just had a conversation about values. Why are we all here? What do we all feel strongly about? And is there a common thread there? So we could find out what that was. And there was one thing that we landed on, and that's that we wanted to use the power of data for good. And I know that that sounds very cliche, but there's a problem right now in healthcare where there are about 6,000 data scientists in the country. But there was an article in the New England Journal of Medicine last May, that cited that only 180 of those data scientists worked in healthcare. There's a huge shortage. And because of that, there are a lot of shortcuts and there's a lot of missed opportunity. So I think it's 30% of the world's data that's out there resides in healthcare. So from a data perspective, there is an incredible amount of potential. And there's so much that we could be doing with that, from a public health standpoint, to provide better care, to better coordinate care, and then also to just help people make money in a more healthy way. It's not about cutting costs in the wrong places. So analytics can do a lot of really great things, but we all felt very strongly that we wanted to use our knowledge in the data arena and with the clients that we were working with to make the world a better place. And we wanted to do it in an ethical way as well. And for anyone who is either a data scientist or if you follow any of these things, there's a movement that is surging right now on ethical use of data, and in particular having a code of ethics for data scientists. Most recently in the news, it came out, the scandal with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. And all of a sudden everyone's like, oh my goodness, people are using our data in inappropriate ways. Well, because we've had so much change in a very short amount of time and the amount of data that we're collecting is so quickly accumulating, there's not a lot of legislation that is governing these things. And so absent legislation, the data science movement is, okay, well, it's up to data scientists to make sure that we have our code of ethics that we're going to abide to, because if left unchecked, you can use data in very inappropriate ways, and in ways that are hurtful to people. So that is a very long-winded way of saying that was the one common goal of our company. And the measure of success is that we're able to do that and impact as many companies as possible.
So it's hard to answer this question without blending into my personal life, because I have 3 daughters who are 5, 8, and 10 years old. And myself pre-motherhood would have been working 24/7, rolling up my sleeves and loving building a company as much as I could. It takes a lot of restraint to not operate that way now. I love operating that way. To me, it's almost like play. And so my definition of success includes also what kind of mother am I? What kind of example do I set for my daughters? How do I work? How do I self-care? How do I give back? And so I actually have to temper my ambition and goals, because I want to be present and not have regrets about what kind of mother I was. And so in the short term, while I want to be a very involved mother, my goals are how many people I help. And later, when they don't need me as much, my goals will be to help as many people as I can. And my big dream is to build a fertile platform that creates a really profitable, multi-dimensional company within my space.
these answers all sound much more well balanced than mine. I don't think I have that work-life balance as straightened out, but for the company that I'm working on now, what we're trying to do is fundamentally supposed to be impossible. We're targeting chronic autoimmune disease, which you call chronic because it's supposed to keep going, and we think we can fix it. And if we're right, we become a standard of care. We become the first-line therapy that somebody would try before they go on Humira or Benlysta or Stelara, these drugs that have side effects like they might give you cancer. Because wouldn't it be great if you could just make a few diet and lifestyle tweaks that for you make your body stop attacking itself? For me, it's exciting because it's a binary. Either we're right and we build this at scale, or we're wrong. And there's no way to sort of peek ahead in the book. The only way to find out is by doing the work, by building the company, by going through the clinical trials. We're recruiting lupus patients right now for a clinical trial, and proving out inch by inch that what we say we can do, and we can do it at scale.
Well, those are 4 fantastic answers, and I think the other, the part of building teams is being able to attract talent. And I think I want to come and work for each one of your companies. So if might have to quit my venture capital career for a little bit, but so want to open it up to you guys, if the audience, yeah, go ahead.
So I have a question. It's somewhat for each of you if you want to answer it. What do you see as your future role in your company? That is CEO, CTO, maybe a board member, and what's your exit plan? There is.
My sort of internal rule is I'm pretty good at the 0 to 1. I find it pretty boring to go, 1 to 10, 10 to 100. So for me, this is a 5-year gig. I'm a year in. If successful, the company will be running smoothly enough that they don't need me anymore, and I'm a shareholder and board member or something like this. But once it's coming along, I move on to something new.
I hope to develop a great team of people to lead different divisions where there's profit sharing so they feel ownership over the company too. And and to build sustainable, diverse revenues that are pretty secure. And it would be amazing to be bought someday or brought into a bigger platform.
But this is a hard question to answer, but I know it's kind of an elementary thing. You have to have your exit plan planned out. For us, there's so much possibility with some of the technologies that we've come up with. And a lot of that is very much dependent on whether people buy it or not and how quickly things change in healthcare. A lot of the things that we do hinge on legislation that is pending. Lots of providers that are out there have to comply with things that they just don't have the technical capability to do. So there's lots of opportunity there as well. So the short answer to your question is I'm not quite sure, but I would definitely love to keep doing what I'm doing for as long as I can because I'm having a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question because it forces you to think about where you're going. And I mean, it's something that the framework that we use in the company is something that we teach everybody in the company. And Shannon's heard this many times, so bear with me. It's the, actually taken from Salesforce, it's the RPM method, which is results, purpose, and method. The first is the result. What is the outcome that you want to accomplish, right? Because what are you trying to do with your company? What's the ultimate impact that you want to have? How big do you want to? How big is your vision? How big do you want to grow this thing? And then to get to that result, what's the purpose? Why are you doing this? What's going to keep you moving forward when things don't go well? When there's payroll issues, or if you can't make ends meet, like what do you do? Why is this important? What's going to help you emotionally push through all of that pain to get to the other side? And then the method is actually, so most people start with the method, which is how do we do something, right? We're going to exit in 5 years, we're going to have this market valuation, I'll be a CEO and do this. Versus, for me, turning that equation around, the method is actually the least important because there can be multiple methods to achieve the same end goal, the same result. And as long as the purpose is strong enough, you'll get there. So for me, it's about, okay, so the goal of Dr. Choice at this point is to be the go-to for everything healthcare navigation. So meaning that my goal is that my vision is to have basically a healthcare system where nobody's confused about what they're going through, how they're paying their bills, and if they are, they know exactly who to call and what to say. That's our goal. And if the method is for us to be, a publicly traded company and buy out other companies, if the method, the quickest way for us to get there is to be acquired by somebody else or grow it organically, then that's going to be the method that we're going to choose. In the method, we can pivot as many times as we need, because as long as you don't run out of money, which money's everywhere, it's like having a bullseye and having unlimited number of darts, and you just got to hit that bullseye. So that's the method. And whether it's me being head of the company or somebody that's more capable being the head of the company, I'm all for it. As long as we can hit that bullseye, we're game.
Greater impact.
The idea of money being everywhere nowadays and more venture funding being available, what are your thoughts on self-funding? Why did you do it? And maybe what are the pros and cons of raising venture capital?
So Paul Graham, Y Combinator, said you got to scale down scalable first. So doing something. So I remember the story of Zipcar, where literally it was like a Volkswagen Beetle that she bought, and then had a little sign-in sheet. And you just sign it out, and the key would be under her porch, and get in, get the car. And you easily steal the car, but I guess nobody stole the car. So scaling down scalable, and I think going back to it takes 7 to 10 years to build. For me, it was not knowing what I know now, right? And having to go through the process to learn all those lessons and so forth. So that's why the reason that I bootstrapped was, and also it was because I had the necessary resources to reach my next goal. So a lot of times I see a lot of folks, and maybe because I have this saying that whatever I'm going to tell you today, it's literally just my opinion. And unless I've done it personally and have shown repeated success, it's just an opinion. In your opinion, it's just as valid as mine, because there's no experience attached to it. So I haven't raised any money. Been offered money, I've not raised any money. The reason I didn't is because each time I had enough resources to get to the next step. And because of that, I didn't want to raise money. But literally, there's a weird rule in Rhode Island. I guess another one's compliance and war stories, where in order for you to pay people on a 2-week basis, so paying everybody every 2 weeks instead of every week, you have to have a credit line that's as big as your monthly payroll. So for the first time, I ended up taking out a credit line. And it was like one of the scariest things, because it's like, what if I end up drawing down a credit line and I'm not able to pay the bank back, or pay an investor back. So that's why I wanted to figure out as much as I can until I get to the point that I know that if I'm going to take X million in infusion of capital, I'm going to be able to return this and be able to have the impact. So that's what drives my decision, which is, can I make, because when you first start, and I was just on a coaching call with somebody I was mentoring before this, and it was like, you get bombarded by imagery nowadays where it's, you get the Lamborghinis and the private jets, and wouldn't it be cool? And I started my business, working from home, working like 500 million hours, dollars an hour, and that can be like really attractive because you're attracted by all that glamour right in front of you. It seems so easy, but really figure out what you need to live and survive. I didn't pay myself a salary for until this year, so year 5, and because of that, I was able to have enough resources to keep on going. And I don't know if that answers your question in terms of when you should bootstrap, because if you have the resources to do it, just do it, because then you own a bigger part of the pie, so you get to make the decisions and drive the vision. And then it also allows you the time to wait for people that can join your team that are going to actually share the vision, versus rushing headfirst into partnership. Because when you take on money, when you take on partners, you are married. And so I got married to my partner first.
I actually want to answer that question a little bit too, just from the investor perspective. I think the longer you can bootstrap your business and not raise capital, the better. And that may seem counterintuitive coming from a venture capitalist, but it's probably one of the things that we say, first in meetings with entrepreneurs: raise less capital or don't raise capital, right? The farther you can get along where you still own 100% of the pie, the better off you're going to be. As soon as you raise capital, it starts a clock. And you need to show progress, you need to show return, you need to show growth, and you're reporting to an investor, right? You now have a board of directors, you have people watching over you, and sometimes, especially in this industry, that isn't the best thing to do. Healthcare is not, there's not viral growth like there are in other industries, and customer sales cycles can take longer, and outside of the biotech world, the biotech world may be a little bit different, but that's definitely the case in healthcare services. So I think, and the other thing is from, when we're looking at potential investment opportunities, we want to invest in the businesses that don't need money, right? If you really need a lot of capital and you're saying, hey, I need $10 million to make this succeed, that's not necessarily where we want to focus our time. We want to focus on the businesses that are sustainable without venture capital, and then we can have an ownership position in them. So I don't know if anybody else wants to answer that question, but we can.
I completely agree with what both of you just said, and this jives with everything else that I've heard people say about getting funding. It is more difficult to bootstrap, to self-fund. My business made the decision to do that, and it really came down to the notion of control, because we wanted to remain true to the reason why we were doing this. Because at the end of the day, if we give up control, it's like, well, why don't we just work for someone else and have them take on all of the risk? Why are we doing this? So we'll continue to do that as long as it makes sense, but we don't have any plans on looking for funding.
Just adding to what everyone else has said, when you're doing something really entrepreneurial, your instincts, following the right instincts is really important. And working for startups backed by great investors in the past, about a third of the month was spent on reporting, preparing for the monthly investor reports. And so that's just something to be aware of if you do have a startup, is there is a lot more reporting to investors. You might have an instinct to follow a certain strategy, but your investors are saying, let's not do it, and they're not as close to the opportunity as you are, so that's just another thing to consider.
Well, I'll just add one more thing, because as a venture capitalist, it means I get to play both sides of the coin. So why you should take money from an investor is, we one, you could say there's the oversight from a board, but I was actually sitting in a company pitch, and someone said to me after got to the end of the meeting with a really interesting company, the entrepreneur said, what are you going to do for me? And he said, are you going to introduce me to customers? Are you going to help with the operations? Are you going to do all these? And maybe investors can add some of those things, but we're investing in you guys because we believe you can do that. The reason why you would want to take an investor on is to help in having an outside perspective on someone that has invested in many other businesses like you and can help avoid the potholes, help you grow efficiently, and take some of the best practices from the other companies. So if we can talk more about why you should take money, but I think both sides of the coin are equally valuable. So, yeah. Good.
How are you dealing with some of the competition in the market today? So if you look at the insurance market, like payers are building very similar applications that you have. Some of you have today, for example, in the employer segment, and then also in the healthcare navigation segment as well. And then the second question I had to that was, how are you dealing with newer advances in the market? So for example, blockchain and artificial intelligence. I know data touches artificial intelligence, but if you can just talk a little bit about what is the unique selling proposition considering the competition?
These are really good questions because the healthcare analytics space is very, very crowded right now. There are lots of solutions, like I said, that are really just out-of-the-box solutions. And anything that is a platform that is static will always have limitations, because then you can only take a look at certain things. And as working with data scientists every day, I understand that once you actually can touch the data and you can really look at it, you find things that you never otherwise would be able to find. So it depends on the type of work that's necessary, but our unique selling proposition is that we build custom tools that are for a very specific need. And we can also work with organizations that, maybe their analytic maturity might be quite low. So a lot of the healthcare investments in analytics, at some of your big hospitals, your big companies are really investing a lot of money in this, and they have like very mature IT resources and a large budget. Well, what happens when you don't have that? Does that mean you just don't look at data at all? But we have the ability to work with firms that maybe they don't have that very high maturity. We can always do something, because at the very most basic level, we can just look at the data and build tools that they can use that don't really require that crazy, $10 million budget to build a custom tool. Did that answer your question?
It did, yes. And also, if you can ask that as well, doctor choice.
Perfect. All right, so I always look at things from a different angle, which is I like competition, right? Because whenever you have a big market, like the Medicare market, right? 55 million Americans, 10,000 turning 65 every single day, 10 billion in distribution costs every single year by the carriers, and then you look at that, and you look at hundreds, if not thousands, of players out there. Go deeper. Whenever you look at competition, go deeper, because my philosophy is always, I want to build something that I'd be happy to sell my parents and also sell everybody that I love. And if you look at the competition and they're not fulfilling that need, that means that there's a need for you to fill. And when you have a really crowded market, and believe me, when somebody turns 65, the amount of mail that you get is just incredible. They kill like 3 trees a day per person. And so the problem is not that there's not enough competition or there's no competition. The problem is that there's too much competition. Everybody's tripping over each other with the noise. So how do you engineer yourself beyond that problem, which is the riches are always in the niches in the beginning, right? When you have a really crowded market and you're a small player, focus on what you do really well. Why are you building this for you, right? What service would, because my problem that I was trying to solve was patients were so confused with all this stuff coming in from all these competitors. They really wanted somebody to provide the keyword here is expert guidance. They don't want another technology platform. They don't want another postcard. They don't want another insurance agent cold calling them from North Carolina saying like, I can sell you a plan that doesn't exist in your area. So for us, that's the niche, which is the expert guidance, expert navigation, and then also being able to build, and so it's all about the execution, because if I told, the greatest companies are the companies that you execute really, really well. And how you execute really well without, because if it's a great idea and it's like you have the perfect idea and you can't patent it, somebody else can take your idea. Everything's gonna be duplicated and you can sue, but you're not gonna have enough money as a startup to go after somebody from a legal perspective. So the best ideas are the ones that seem so common, it's like, yeah, so, right? Like the shaver, like the Harry's thing, like the Dollar Shave Club. Somebody goes to you and say, hey, I'm gonna sell you a razor for $1. You're like, screw this, like this is nothing new. There's Gillette, you go to CVS, but they did it differently, right? They did it, and then also know that the margins are gonna go down. Once you figure out something, you're successful at it, if you don't keep on moving, yeah, your competitors are gonna eat away at your margins, so you have to create something new. So our goal is to go out of business, not because I sucked at running a business, but because we solved the problem. So, and for that, I know that right now we have a really interesting niche, and there's a window of opportunity to capture it, and I have to innovate, either fall in love with the customer or fall in love with the market, right? I gotta figure out what my customers really want, and then be able to provide more services to them and solve more of their problems along the same line. And when you do that, another piece of advice, I'm going above and beyond your question, but I'm really passionate about this topic, is that don't worry about, only go 1 degree of separation. Because if you're really good at razors and then you start selling I don't know, matchboxes or something, it makes no sense. So figure out what your core expertise is and then go 1 step above. Even if you look at the Amazon expansion story, they've always felt that they go more than 1 degree of separation from their core competency. So basically you have to not only be successful in your niche and be able to have enough margin, right, to reinvest, but then be able to go 1 degree and really fall in love with the customer before your competitors catch up.
One more thing, because I just remembered I completely forgot to address your very good question about blockchain, because that will, I believe, transform certain aspects of healthcare. Right now, blockchain is in the very early stages where it is very much a problem looking for, or a solution looking for a problem. So it is something that has huge potential within healthcare, but it's going to take a lot of coordination for it to have a far-reaching impact. It absolutely can, but I think that we need to build on many other pieces of coordination before we can actually get to implementing blockchain. So I believe that we're a few years out. AI does have some real huge potential, and we have built some technology that uses natural language processing to identify places where coding wasn't correctly input. So if providers needed to input certain diagnostic codes, and for us, the purpose of this actually is a financial purpose for the provider. If their coding isn't correct, sometimes they miss out on reimbursements that they could be getting from CMS. So there's a lot of really great technology out there, and some of it is in the early stages, but we can do some great things in the next 5 or 10 years with it.
One more comment on that. So just give you perspective, I'd buy a fax machine to start my company.
All right, and so try and get through a couple more questions. So 2 people, only to be at 2 answers, not double. You guys can't double up on these, Sean. But no, I'm kidding. Yeah, go ahead.
Curious to hear from all 5 of you actually. What are companies, nonprofit or for-profit, that are using tech in creative ways in the healthcare space that you admire, and what is it about them that they're doing well? Why do you admire them?
So in healthcare, people are moving from physical service to telehealth, and there are 1,001 telehealth companies. The one that I actually really like is called CirrusMD. They said that rather than just setting up a 15-minute video visit where you see your doctor, why not give you the ability to communicate the way that presumably many of you communicate already, which is through text. And by creating this asynchronous communication between you and a clinician, they resolve 97, 98% of complaints without having to escalate to a phone call or a video visit. The reason that I like them is that that's the only way you actually start going after value-based care. So right now, if you go to the doctor, mostly the doctor gets paid for you showing up. Check, you know. Should I do something different?
No, I think it was mine.
Got it. Basically, the more you go, the more they get paid, the higher healthcare cost goes over time. In order to change the system, you have to get paid a different way, and they go per member per month. When I met them 2 years ago, they had about 300,000 managed Medicaid lives, where this population had unlimited access to their service, not for really serious stuff, but for the minor stuff to help keep you from needing the serious stuff. They're now north of 2 million covered lives a couple of years later. And I like them not because everybody can do telehealth, but because of the way that they're applying telehealth to the value equation of healthcare in order to actually bend the cost curve, to bring the cost of care down.
My answer to that is we have 15 portfolio companies. I love all of them equally, and so I won't go through them all. But WaterlineVentures.com, you can check out all of them.
Well, there's gonna be like a but there's this other company.
All equal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys spoke a lot about how if you are in too much of a rush, you can accidentally put the wrong team together. The 2 of us come from a background where we put a bunch of people in a space for 24 to 48 hours and tell them to put something out. So what are the things that you guys look for on gut instinct in a team that we can teach people to look for? Because the complementary aspects, I think, are sometimes difficult to figure out in 5 minutes when you're talking to someone after an elevator pitch.
So is this to say that people are able to build their own teams?
Yeah.
Okay, and how long do they have to vet their potential team members?
About 35 minutes.
35 minutes. So, this could be a teaching opportunity for the people in teaching, okay, like here's the task at hand. Here are the qualities that are, and I don't know if you can find any studies, it would be better if you have something that is actually already out there, but these are the qualities that define the people who are most successful at solving this problem. So, if it were me, I'd probably do something similar to speed dating. You don't have that much time, but you have to talk to as many people as possible and teach people here's what you're looking for, and have them kind of use that as their criteria to quickly vet people. It would be tough. It would be really tough to do that in a half hour.
I would actually just reiterate something that Johnny said in diversity, right? If people are trying to find other teammates that are just like themselves, it's really hard to come up with different viewpoints. And the whole point of a hackathon is to rapidly iterate new perspectives. So figuring out the people that are least like themselves, I think, is probably one of the best ways to put that together. So
you're talking about like a hackathon, right?
Yep, yeah.
Yeah, so in those situations, and having worked with a couple of hackathons, my advice is always just sell something. Figure out how you guys can sell something to an end consumer within those 24 hours. And you'll know how well you work together. And then first step is knowing who you are and knowing what questions to ask to see if the other person is complimentary to you or not.
I think we have time for one more question. So one over here. Did you have your hand up? Oh, is that just was the stretch? Okay. Yeah.
So I have a question. We see a lot of vertical integration happening in the healthcare space, and also all the big tech companies like Alibaba, Amazon, Apple, they're all after health. And then so because you guys have so much experience in this space, could you just comment on like the bigger trends and then, point out some interesting insights or students?
So there are two things that are happening right now. The first one is the vertical integration. As soon as the CVS Aetna deal came up, everyone knew, okay, well now everyone has to follow suit or else no one can be competitive if you're in that space. And as we've seen in the past couple of months, lo and behold, this is exactly what's happening. So I think that we're going to see some very large healthcare verticals where you have a health insurance company that also has a PBM and maybe has a retail presence. What CVS is doing right now is really notable because 70% of the American population lives within 3 miles of a CVS. So what their strategy is, which will be so impactful because they're so big and there's so many CVSs out there, is that they are going to have a location-based strategy to building market share and also to improving people's health. So they want their CVSs to be health centers. Whenever someone needs anything, they're going to be going to a CVS. So we're going to see a lot of that. And then the other thing is, I think that we're going to see a lot of changes in the employer healthcare space because of what JP Morgan and Amazon and Berkshire Hathaway are doing. My guess, because they have such a big financial impact in that space, is that they're going to happen upon a way to provide healthcare delivery to their employees at a much cheaper cost. And then we're going to see other people follow suit
because no one actually knows what they're doing yet, right? It's
And
just that
they
they're
don't
doing.
know
They don't
either.
know. They just said we're doing something.
Yep.
And we're big enough that that's going to matter.
Yeah. They still haven't even hired, at least to my knowledge, at last word, they hadn't hired a CEO for this initiative. But they have some ideas in mind. But these are the things that they're getting at. And Warren Buffett specifically said, if we just wanted to use our negotiating power, we could shave off 3 to 4%, but we're looking to do something much bigger than that. So this is great. It's a huge opportunity to really impact the cost of care delivery.
So I'm gonna stop right there. I know you guys, a couple of you guys have to catch trains, but if you're gonna hang around for a minute, it might be a couple more questions. But this was really fantastic. So Johnny, Shannon, Sophia, Daniel, thank you guys very much.